Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second annual APRU MetaGames Conference. This is the second day of programming of the annual Delve hosted by Cyberport. To our honorable guests and online viewers, welcome. My name is Pamela Tang and I am your host today. We have an exciting program for you today, featuring panel discussions on skills of the future and the gamification of social well-being, in which we seek to foster collaboration between industry and universities on strategies to work together in order to build thriving esports communities across the Asia Pacific. Our range of distinguished speakers are from Hong Kong and mainland China, Japan, France, Singapore, and the USA to share their insights. We encourage you to actively participate in the conference by asking questions during the sessions. Simply scan the QR code shown on the screen. Also, don't forget to share your experience on social media and tag us at #DELF2021 at APRU1997. To kick off today's event, may we please invite Mr. Sherman Cheng, Chief Financial Officer of the Association of Pacific Rim Universities. As a network of leading research universities linking the Americas, Asia, Australia, and the Pacific, the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, APRU, is the voice of knowledge and innovation for the Asia-Pacific region. It brings together thought leaders, researchers, and policymakers to exchange ideas and collaborate on effective solutions to the challenges of the 21st century. Mr. Cheng, please.
All distinguished guests and participants, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. No matter where and how you are joining us today, I welcome you to APRU's second MetaGame Conference in partnership with Cyberport here today. We are deeply grateful to our host, Mr. Peter Yan, CEO of Cyberport, for including our international conference as the spotlight event of the Digital Entertainment Leadership Forum here in Hong Kong, also known as Delve. As one of the strategic pillars for Cyberport, we look forward to building a longer-term partnership between APRU and Cyberport for the development of the esports ecosystem in Hong Kong and in the Asia-Pacific region. To highlight, Cyberport has supported the APRU's Esports Fellowship Program by offering students insights and access to esports industry through workshops, internship opportunities, and entrepreneurship opportunities. Fitting another pillar, Cyberport Partners, APRU has established its new International University Center, RUC, at Cyberport this past February with a grand opening ceremony last month. Together with our network members in Hong Kong, the RUC provides an opportunity for all APRU members to work with around 800 startups and technology companies here at Cyberport. As the digital technology hub in Hong Kong, APRU brings our international network to Cyberport, whereby we aim to take our collaboration to the next level to empower innovative talent and steer the industry forward. Last year, we held our inaugural MetaGame Conference also on Day 2 of Delve. During that conference, we presented different ideas.
So whether that's participation in a professional training program for athletes or signing up for a one-off weekend course on how to stream on Twitch, or just playing with maybe fellow students on a campus league or in a tournament. All of these practices consist of the creation and sharing and consuming of different forms of knowledge and skills. And finally, the third objective kind of deals with or focuses on the who. It's about describing how the creation, sharing, and learning of such knowledge and skills is actually experienced by participants in relation to their own leisure practices, as well as to their own career plans and aspirations. And certainly the career opportunities or trajectories differ greatly between, for example, a university student who's getting an athletic scholarship to other individuals who may even forego tertiary education in hopes of making it big as a streamer or a game influencer. And so we need to understand who these different individuals are within the esports ecosystem. We need to understand their experiences in and around esports and try to connect that to their own, again, hopes, goals, and aspirations through their play. Now, these are some of the topics not only that I'm interested in, but that are being discussed by other participants at the conference today. And I think there's a recognition that esports participation not only involves these kinds of knowledge and skills development, but also impacts people's personal and social well-being. Whether we want to talk about, individual well-being in terms of mental or physical health, of self-confidence, of developing problem-solving skills, or improving academic performance, or whether we want to think on the more social dimensions, such as providing opportunities to build safe and inclusive communities of play, developing friendship networks and peer networks that could pay off as in one's adult life. I think esports has the capacity to prepare people in a number of ways to actively participate in creating and then living a digital life.
And so reappearing here on the last slide, what I hope is that the MetaGame Conference 2021 serves as a useful platform for everyone involved to discuss these and other important topics. I want to thank APRU and Cyberport Hong Kong again, and I wish all of you a happy conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Williams, for sharing your insights and findings. We now welcome our first panel discussion, Esports, Gaming, and the Skills of the Future. This session will be moderated by Mr. Eric Chan, Chief Public Mission Officer, Hong Kong Cyberport. Joining him on stage is Mr. Tim Shen, CEO and founder, Esports Media Limited. And virtually, please welcome Dr. Baron Hyun, Director, Digital Content Advisory, TMT, KPMG Consulting Japan, Professor Yu Pei Zhao, College of Media and International Culture, Zhejiang University, and Mr. Niles Sky, Calviloa University of Hawaii. Thank you. We'll have a Q&A for you this session. You may simply scan the QR code and type in your questions during the discussion. Mr. Chan, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Good day, everyone. So, hello. Team. Good morning. You're looking as smart as usual. Oh, thank you. And hello, everyone joining us online. And also particularly, our panel speakers. Well, this is the first panel in the APRU MetaGame Conference themed Esports, Gaming, and Skills of the Future. Before we get started with the deep dive questions, why don't I ask all our panelists for each of you to introduce yourself and your background and share your ideas and thoughts about what types of training needs to occur in order to prepare students for the digital society and what more needs to be done and what are the opportunities for esports to play a role. Maybe I ask Tim to get started first.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to share this panel with all the professionals, especially Eric. I have prepared a brief PPT because today looks like the issues, there are quite a few, from esports, gaming, skills, metaverse, blockchain, digital arts. So I hope these few pages of PPT can summarize my thoughts for your reference. Yeah. So a little bit on my background. In short, I am a fund manager. So for our practice, not only we have been focusing on investing in listed public equities, but we are also active investors and operators in private equity projects, including esports projects. So for the esports project, I'm the investor and founder of an international esports group by the name of Esports. For that, we mainly engage in the midstream and downstream of the esports ecosystem. Mainly, it means we cover operations such as events, tournaments, online education, esports, games downloading and supplies. And recently, we just launched our NFT marketplace to facilitate our esports talents. In terms of the achievements for this group, as of now, we, after 3 years of operations, we now cover 60 plus countries with, as of today, about 7 million registered users. Within our platform, we also are now managing 20,000 plus talents from 25 countries, covering a wide aspect of professionals, from gamers, coaches, commentators, KOLs, game designers, etc. So maybe we go to the other parts of the slide, just to run through a little bit of the other information. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So in terms of metaverse, I think this is a good way to start this part of the presentation, because at the end, I hope all the elements we would like to cover can be inclusive in this kind of setup, which for metaverse, we always like to pinpoint the 4 pillars. The first is the technology, second is the community, the third is the trading platform or tools, and the last are the entry points. So in terms of the more detailed explanation, for example, like technology, usually metaverse, the basic component is the blockchain, AR, VR, AI, token, wallet, etc. And community is a must-have because for any platform, you need participants. And in terms of trading platform or tools, usually operator will make use of NFT. And the last but not least are the entry points. Esports is always or is now the pleasant most applied functions or applications for most metaverse. And again, in this chart, you can see it right in the middle because of the what we call the element applications that will include esports, gaming, and other entertainment type like art, concerts, etc. But on the other hand, metaverse obviously will cover
applications in work, in education, and especially for investments, such as in the case of this Decentraland. We can see investors or participants have been actively buying up virtual land for their own development. So this chart will hopefully show where we position ourselves. As you can see, our esports group, the Esports, is right in the middle or tending to migrate to the upper right corner, achieving the metaverse status. Same, more or less same for our NFT marketplace world. For the other PE operations of ours, though looks like there is still some distance from achieving the metaverse status, but it all provides the elements of the 4 pillars I just mentioned. So this is another chart showing, hopefully with our present operations in the few PE projects, we already occupy the center core of this metaverse universe. And what we need is just to expand on all sides in order to achieve a well-rounded metaverse platform. And obviously, these are the market leaders, including NVIDIA, which is a CPU or GPU operator, Meta, which is Facebook, and focusing on social media, Roblox, which is a blockchain game company. So I think this will provide insights for especially the youngsters who want to pursue a future career in metaverse or esports, how to position their skills. And especially in Hong Kong, students usually want to have a career in the financial system. And for example, like want to become a fund manager or an analyst. A good sign is that just within the past 2 months, there are already some listed funds that mainly focusing on metaverse. And not only these new funds keep coming up, being launched, but you can see the return. The poorest one in this group is also in the positive range. Not to mention the best performer has about 50% in just 1 month. This just shows what are the most popular NFTs people are dealing with in the NFT marketplaces. Yeah. And just mentioned what is the latest marketplace. And our intention is to facilitate talents, especially talents in the art and the esports areas, to exhibit that these youngsters are multi-talented. Yeah, so this concludes my intro on our operations. Thank you very much, Eric.
Thank you, team. So may I now turn to Barrow, probably to introduce yourselves as well. I know Barrow is now in Japan, right? Hi, Barrow.
Barrow, you should turn on your voice, yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Yep. So nice to meet you, Eric. Thanks for having me today. I'm based in Tokyo, as you said. And so let me introduce myself a little bit. I'm afraid we're having some technical issue to show an actual slide, so mine will be entirely verbal. So hi everyone, I'm Bao Hyun. I'm based in Tokyo, as I said, and I work for a company called KPMG Consulting, and I'm a director for digital content advisory. So a little bit of background about myself. I'm originally from South Korea. Grew up in the States. I was trained as an engineer, but I have a PhD in aerospace engineering, but my passion took me where I am. So I'm happy to say that I'm doing something completely unrelated to my degree. What we do at KPMG, we started from 2018 as a name called the Esports Advisory. And that was before Japan really took off with the esports scene because, coming to Japan as an outsider, it was kind of odd seeing Japan, such a big gaming nation, wasn't that big in esports back when I came to Japan in 2016 and 17 timeframe. So we took that as an opportunity, and I put myself as a mission to transform KPMG, which is not known as any sort of gaming or esports related services, but it's more known as auditing or tax or accounting, into something more esports focused service provider. So there was a lot of challenge, but I think the effort was very rewarding. And since we started from 2018, it really took off from there. So from then, right now we have a very vast, a range of clients. Majorly, so we provide think tank service for the Japanese government, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry on their esports activity. So in 2019, we actually published a comprehensive esports market report on the future Japanese esports market. On the other hand, we also have a lot of private sector clients that is not only focusing on gaming or esports content themselves, but also the business around. And the part of the reason we really try to focus on the esports business, and that comes to the question why we joined as KPMG. And the bottom line is that as we see the gaming market, I grew up as a gamer when I was young, of course, but then gaming ecosystem has been focused on the player themselves and also the game publisher who creates the game. So we see that the business ecosystem was relatively small, whereas being esports, that paradigm has been shifted to more viewership-based entertainment. You don't have to really be a player, or you don't have to actually create games or have your own IP. There's many different ways of approaching this industry. You can be a sponsor, event organizer, team owner, etc., etc. And therefore, this gives a lot of opportunities and options for company owners or business owners who originally had nothing to do with esports. And that's where we come in as KPMG, providing a third-party advisory service on making those business decisions. And last but not least, we also started providing esports educational service right from off the bat, where we started in 2018, because we thought that a lot of the activities going on, especially in this digital content business, is really either on creating the content themselves or being focused on the performance, like being an esports player. But even if you don't have that artistic talent or that performance, there's still a lot of room that you can associate with this field, and that's actually the business side of it, and that's where we really try to contribute. So with KO University, we've been providing a esports business dedicated curriculum since 2018. Now it's gradually expanding out over to not only esports but also in gaming and metaverse as well. So that's sort of the overview of what we do over here locally. And also, as I said, I have a lot of passion in this field. And last year, I have published a book myself called Demystifying Esports. And if you are curious about how esports really started as a business in South Korea back in the 90s and how it really grew up from there, feel free to take a look. It's my personal take on how it's really get into shape. And honestly, back when we were playing, nobody really knew that this is going to be this big, but this is now it's a global phenomenon. So it's really like there are a lot of humble stories that happened back in Korea. I know Sky also agrees on some of the points. So if you're interested, feel free to take a look at it. And thanks for having me again.
Thank you, Barrow. Next, we have Professor Yupei Zhao from Zhejiang University. Professor Zhao, please.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to meet you guys here, and I'm really appreciate APRU to invite me to have this kind of conversation to other talents here. And today I would like to show some of my recent research about esports industry and culture. So, Anna, could you help me to share my slides here? Yeah.
Can we share the slides from Professor Xiao? No? Okay.
Oh, you can't. Can I do my stuff? Oh, I can't because someone other participate also do the sharing. So okay, and no matter, it's fine. And I would like to take this chance to introduce little bit more about my recent research. So, firstly, I would like to give you a background of what I am doing. I'm based in Zhejiang University, and to be honest, I'm probably the one scholar who fully concentrated on esports culture in China. And I have done a lot of research about, for example, how the esports player could sustain their career, and also how could we take this kind of platformization of infrastructure and infrastructuralized of platform to looking at esports industry like Tencent. And also I'm looking at the well-being and the psychological capital about esports players and how they interact with the clubs and their leaders and also the coaches, so etc. So today I would like to demonstrate one of my recent research about identity transformation under the concept of the stigma power to looking at the mental well-being of the Chinese esports player. So the background is because in 2003, the State General Administration of the Sport of China approved esports as the country's 1990s official sport. And the second turning point of the year is 2016 because China surpassed the United States as the world's largest digital gaming market. And in 2018, the revenue for online and offline PC, mobile esports, and games in China exceeded RMB 91.2 billion. So over 350 million consumers play mobile ones. Um, so we know that there is an ongoing debate and misunderstanding about esports and video games. So even though there are a lot of uh, there are a lot of research about this kind of discrepancies between esports and video games, but um, no matter from the skills, organization, professionalism, and institutions, this kind of key dimensions can help to clarify that esports has their own rules, their own, industrial paths when differ from the video industry. So my research keep asking three important questions about esports players. Are you athlete? Are you sure you're athlete? Are you athlete? So this kind of three questions to chase on how their attitude and try to identify how their self-perceive their identity transformation. So actually in the first period from 2003 to 2011, which I called the first reflux of the period of in China, because during the time we know we have this kind of cultural value issues that roots in the stereotype of the online gaming describing as the hero, right? So which means the people or the young people who choose to be professional athlete have suffered with this kind of cultural values issues. So at that time, this kind of young people who are renting a house for both living and working, and they have no secured investment and no insurance, no corporation model. So they suffered a lot to, uh, to how to say, to destigmatize themselves, and they are still suffering this kind of prejudice. So during that time, there is still blurred boundary between professional and non-professional. However, in 2011, there's the turning point because of the three main factors have driven this kind of fascinating development of esport industry in China. The first reason because of the Chinese government, who has facilitated numerous policies and events to support esport industry, including the game content, the licensing, tournaments, education coaches, and in terms of a lot of welfare to attract the professional players. And also, there's a list of the policies launched by over 9 departments in China to support this industry. In particular, the 2016, Chinese esport industry entered a new stage because the administration from different departments have covered support for importing digital technology from other Chinese states and encourage the industry to improve the development of mobile games, live streaming services, and VR technology. And the third is because they founded the initiative to organize the international and national professional esport tournaments. The last point is they encourage the Chinese college and university to offer professional esport courses. So because of background of this macro development and also because of the regional level governing body, but like Shanghai, Chengdu, Xi'an, this kind of top cities have launched a series of the policy to attract the clubs and the players. And also, we have observed that the most important is that official news agencies have started to refer esport professionals as athletes rather than adepts. They have been legitimized as national heroes by winning the international esport championship. So there's a lot of changes since 2011 to 2016. And of course, since 2016, we called golden age has come. However, we still have a lot of suffering, like the policy of banning esport from television broadcast brought this kind of important changes about esport industry chain in China. So live streaming broadcast platform as the main bottom string of the esport value chain has played a key role as the most important distribution channel. However, this kind of change has, how to say, drive some players into an economic-driven career path because there is a large salary gap of the average annual income of the official players between 18,000 RMB to 20 million RMB. So my concern, or I would like to tentatively close my speech today is I have concerns about this kind of role of live streaming played in esport distribution bottom line, and also because we are talking about the groups is young people and the players who have a very short golden age for to sustain their career. In China, the golden age is between 15 to 22 years old. So we have a lot of concerns about they have this kind of determinant to sustain their career paths. However, the happy or the owner is I have a lot of responses for esport players. They have demonstrated that yet the career life is very short, but you will choose it because they have passion on it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, professors. So next we have Mr. Now Sky Pavilo from University of Hawaii. Hi, Now. I think you're mute.
Okay, apologies. Am I unmuted?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about that. All right, so I'm now Sky Kaviloa. I'm a PhD student at the University of Hawaii, And thank you guys for having me at the APRU Mega Games Conference. I really appreciate it. So I wanted to actually start out my introduction with a few pictures. The slides that I brought have actually been from a recent event that took place in Honolulu on the UH Manoa campus. And what took place really, I think, encapsulates, I think, a lot of the points that have been made by the keynote speakers and by the panelists themselves. And this idea of not centering the player within the ecosystem. And what took place, and we can go to the next slide to start the presentation. What took place is really an event where we had one of the biggest video game companies in North America come to Honolulu, again, come to the Manoa campus of the University of Hawaii to hold Overwatch events. And the Overwatch events were events that really defined a new relationship between a very large video game company, a developer, a publisher, and Hawaii itself. To kind of go off the keynote speakers when they talked about the idea of the environment playing a fundamental role in games. The idea here is that the Activision Blizzard publisher and developer wanted to come to Hawaii because they wanted to figure out a way in which they could create global play between North America and East Asia. And it was a very big surprise when I got the call, but it was an event that really kind of changed the direction of what esports could mean for Asia Pacific. And what happened is that it came to the University of Hawaii, and we can go to the next slide, principally because they wanted to use our campus as a point in which they could hold the tournaments, but also because they wanted to use the actual undersea cables that go from Honolulu to Tokyo. And the Tokyo servers are the servers that they actually held the games on. So South Korea and China, the teams that represent South Korea and China for Overwatch would play off the Tokyo servers. And then, of course, teams in North America, they would fly to Hawaii, again, to close that gap in transmission rates. And then we would play off the Tokyo servers as well. And this was, again, a fundamental shift in thinking of where Hawaii thought itself in this global discussion around esports. And again, this was a discussion in which the company Activision Blizzard wanted to come and just use facilities. They wanted to rent out space and they wanted to rent out infrastructure. But what actually happened is that we've turned this into a larger partnership among students. And what this took place, or what happened in this partnership, is that they actually had professional players flying to Honolulu, right, to Manoa campus, and we were able to create an internship of roughly 20 students. And so in this picture right here, you have the Dallas Fuel. And I'll talk about this a little bit later in our discussion. But a lot of the teams that came from the Overwatch League came from, again, North America. So we had Dallas, we had Atlanta, we had Los Angeles Gladiators. But in reality, these teams are largely South Korean kids, right? And these, again, majority of the Overwatch League is a South Korean league, or roughly around 60% of the players come from South Korea or have Korean backgrounds. And so we were able to turn this into an internship in which students would actually learn how to run the league itself. And so the internship began in May and it ran into August. The Overwatch League would come 1 week in each month from Monday to Friday, and the interns would shadow the entire league. They would learn how to do the IT. So I have a picture right here of the students setting up the networks in the middle at the bottom. And then we had students actually do integrity checks. They had the students set up the actual computers themselves. And so overall, it was a situation in which you had a lot of different literacies and skills being built around this. And so for students themselves, this was not just about learning STEM subjects, but this is an opportunity in which they got to learn a whole host of skills that were really both hard skills and soft skills within the project itself. Once again, I think this is a great example of what we're talking about at this conference, in which it presents a case study of what could happen when you bring together both, ARPU universities, you bring, universities from the West Coast, from North America, you bring publishers and developers together to do this. So thank you very much, and I look forward to speaking more about this.
Thank you, Niall. So, in order to leave a little bit more time at the end, for some interactive question and answers, I'll start, talking to each of our panelists, and maybe we can keep the answers short and precise to within, 3 to 4 minutes, so that we can have some time, left for the interactive Q&A. So maybe I'll, turn to Tim, who is sitting next to me, at Cyberport. Well, we know that you have just conducted a couple of metaverse webinar, right? All these new tech, metaverse, blockchain, digital arts, and other emerging technologies. What do you think it will affect, the industry as a whole, and what type of skills you expect, from the future workforce to cope with these emerging technologies? And probably this quickly, also you comment on the importance of empowerment of women, in esports. Thank you, Tim.
So it's a two-part question. The first part, actually, I have briefly mentioned in my previous PPT. Of course, if it can be uploaded again. That one single slide shows esports, which is part of that. And on one side is work and education, and the other side is investment, etc. That constitutes the whole metaverse. So for us, the objective is to see that esports, if we are comparing to the so-called financial development, 30, 40 years ago, the slogan is bring Wall Street to the main street. So esports, for us, the reason why for the past 3 years we have been mainly focusing on the midstream, downstream, because that will cover and addresses a majority of the esports participants. But still, we think the most satisfactory goal is to include as many people as possible, because even though now in the successful cases of, say, Roblox, every day they have about 40 million plus users at the same time. But if we compare to the now global population of 90 billion plus, this is still a very small number. And the reason mainly that for someone like myself, I call myself old guys, we actually are not that quite interested sometimes in certain kind of sports that will get the youngsters excited. So if some kind of future games that can include most of the population, that will be the ideal situation, which I think is very probable. And that's why for us, we are planning next year, we also will enter the upstream of esports, which is the game publishing. But the type of game we are looking at are the blockchain games. Because blockchain games, at least the advantage is people not only can come and enjoy, participate as a player and user, but they can also create. So creating or being a creator is one way to enhance the participation by the general public. Of course, as I mentioned in my ecosystem, we purposely not only just focusing on the hosting of events, tournaments, talents management, though it covers 25 countries' talents. We also, as I mentioned, have online education, the e-commerce platform, which the purpose again is to facilitate these participants, especially gamers, to show that they are really multi-talented. A good example is if you have heard about a esports KOL by the name of Ninja. Actually, I don't think he has now spend most of the time in participating in any major tournaments. His daily work actually is streaming. But because the model works in a sense, he has a few million or more than 10 million of followers. So even if he is charging $1 per fan, that would mean he is already a millionaire every month. So that's why this is the kind of ecosystem that I hope I can bring to all the esports participants. So for the second part regarding women's participation in esports, actually we are a very active supporter of this movement. Actually, before the global lockdown due to COVID, we have already kickstarted our global series of what we call the Girls Power tournaments. And the first leg already successfully hosted in Philippines. And for that event, it shows that we are right. Not only for that single stop, we have few hundred female esports teams participated. And also in terms of the audience reach, just single event has achieved 10 million plus online audience reach. So, but unfortunately, due to the lockdown, we cannot continue the multiple stops originally being planned for this Girls Power tournament.
Thank you, team. So may I turn to Barrow? We know that you have written a book, called Demystifying Esports, a personal guide to the history and future of competitive. And well, we know that many young people are now passionate about esports. So esports is not really about just playing games, but the career opportunities, and also the industry is trying to further develop this as a whole industry. What's your recommendations to universities, to support students pursuing this as a career?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. That's a great question, and glad that you brought that out. So let me start with the, why I wrote this book. So I wrote this book for my mother-in-law because she thinks that gaming is still evil. Because my two sons who play Fortnite like hours every day, they're like 9 and 7, but they only focus on the game. And for their grandma, who's my mother-in-law, she never played any games. So it's something that she can really, it's hard to relate for her. So I'm seeing that, and that's not only our household, that's also, I think it's pretty much globally what's happening. So we're having this bipolar generation where we have a generation like my parents' generation who never played games, but pretty much from around my generation below, we grew up with games. And knowing that or not knowing that, it's really a different experience. We grew up with games. And knowing that or not knowing that, it's really a different experience. And because you're pretty much not being involved with any sort of gaming community. So I wanted to bridge that gap because, knowing that my parents probably not going to play any games for the rest of their life, but they may read a book that's related to them, that's related to gaming or esports, and they may want to understand because that's something that their grandchildren are very passionate about it. And book is something, a very familiar form for the parents' generation. So that's one reason. And also another one was that from the business side, where I worked as KPMG as a esports consultant, we went through a lot of a frustrating situation from the business standpoint as well, because a lot of the time when we actually do a proposal to our client who shows a lot of interest, especially on the who's driving the project, that person level, but when it goes to the people who has the decision-making authority on top of the ladder in the corporate organization, oftentimes we get turned down the proposal themselves not because of the business prospects, but more about because they really didn't understand what esports or gaming is. To them, it's really like they have that image. I'm not trying to put everything in the condescending tone, but it's something that they're not really familiar with. So I wanted to bridge, the bipolar generation kind of situation together with this book. And what I'm trying to, so that also relates to what I do at KU University, because as I said in the intro, I think as an industry, a lot of the focus are being made on. I mean, it's a content business, and there's a secondary or tertiary business layer based on that content. And esports, I think it's also has a similar structure. So a lot of the time, the effort is really focused on that content creating, whether that being making a game, playing a good game, or streaming a game, etc. But there's still a room for business professional to be involved because I think, relatively speaking, I think this industry still requires a lot more business professionals who knows the industry, who knows the content side of the business, and who has a passion about the interactive media itself, or also the anime, manga, whatever subcultures that can be related to. So that's where actually we come in, and we've been very grateful with partnering with KEO, and it's been expanding to other regions as well. That we've been trying to teach the business side of the curriculum, how you can relate, how you can help the industry, and by also we call in guest speakers from within the industry. So we have had guest speakers like the big game publishers locally here in Japan, but also the esports event producers or etc. So we have places like HP, Alibaba, Microsoft, Sega, Taito, etc., etc. So, and these are all relatable stakeholders within the esports ecosystem, and they have their own challenges. And I think having students to get that exposure and knowing what's going on, it really gives them a first-hand alignment of what they want to do in the future in their career. And that may not be being a best player in the tournament. That may not be being the best content creator. It could be a producer for an event. It could be something completely not making a content itself, but more business related. So that's where I think we're focusing our effort into. So I mean, on the side note. So my high school friends back in Korea, they still make fun of me if I when I say I'm doing esports consultant, because they say I was the worst StarCraft player back in high school, and but I'm still contributing in this field in my own way on the business side of it, and I think that's a sort of a message I like to give it to the students, that you don't have to be the great player, you don't have to make a really great content yourself, but still there's a room for contribution. And also at the same time, this is very mutually beneficial to our corporate client as well, because they're always looking for new talents from schools. And it's just that not every company has that benefit to have that a reach to directly to the students. And so, for example, the curriculum that we provide is that after having these guest speakers and speak about their industry, at the end of the day, we let our students to do a business pitch, like a consultant. So they dress up all in suit and tie and come to our office, and we bring in all our guest speakers from the industry, and they group up and they give a business pitch about their new business idea on esports. So like imagine they're becoming a startup, and they have a very active discussion with the guest speakers. And if the corporate client, if the conversation goes really well, they can be hired right on spot. So we have students from our class who actually got into like Nintendo and Sony, and that kind of game publishers as well. So and what we're learning from that is that big company also eager to have those first-hand feedback from students directly, because it really, gaming, digital content, or all these entertainment, the core users are the younger generation, Gen Z, as you know. So they want to hear what they're up to, what they like, and how they feel about it. So this is also very valuable to the company side as well. So, as us being the middleman, trying to connect, the company side and also student side, that has been something very successful locally here, and I believe that can be something, extendable to, other regions and also other target as well.
Okay, thank you, Vero. So apart from doing consultancy, I hope you still have time to improve your game. So let me turn to Professor Xiao. Well, we have learned that recently we have regulations to restrict mainland China young people for online games playing. So we want to hear from you. What's the latest perceptions of esports in mainland, and also, we talk about you talk about mental wellness and all this lifespan of competitive esports players as well. So, what should be done, to prolong, their lifespans, and any kind of anecdotes from your studies that you can share, please, Professor?
Thank you for your question. I think what I've totally observed right now is we have more challenge than the milestone we have achieved. So, like I said before, we have still a lot of concerns regarding of either from the governmental bodies or from the industrial, like entrepreneurial side. So first, I would like to demonstrate is whether or not esport can make it to CCTV um, is a key to help the esport players to gain the recognition from the society, because most of my interviewees, the young people, have responded that it will be a milestone for them if esport can be allowed to broadcast on CCTV, because their older generation, like the brothers say, the parents or grandparents, their trust in the mainstream media. So that's my first concern, and that's my first the courage for the CCTV. The second is, the decision making process is a black box hard to prop in, and the ubiquity found in state policies towards esports precisely exemplify the fragmented nature of Chinese esport policies making process, and one that requires negotiation and bargaining among different departments to build this kind of consensus. Like I said, there are over 9 departments have involved in the regulation of esport in China, and they have their own policy goals. And the second, my concern is different from Wang Sitong, like I said before, the richest song of the entrepreneur in China who have invested primarily in the individual esport clubs. And Tencent, as leading company, has invested as largely go to what I have called umbrella stand of the industry in my research. So their value chain and the multi-sided platform Tencent has established over the years under the regulatory umbrella clause governed by Chinese authority. So they have assumed multiple roles from authorizing, producing, distributing the content, acting as the executive body of a number of the leagues. So posing as this kind of monopoly power enterprises dominate the market player have invited a lot of concerns. I'm not blaming their, what they have achieved and what they have contributed to the whole industry. What I mean is we invite more stakeholders, invite more like ByteDance, also emerging media conglomerates can also get involved to maintain this a sustainable industry. So what the bright side is actually the esport industry in China follows a bottom-up path. So the industry with such a huge market size, the government has come up and set some rules to regulate it. But in this regard, the government is only set up the bottom line, leaving enough spaces for industry to further development, in particular for cultural and creative involvement. After all, the game contributes so much to GDP, so the government is still taking it seriously. The last thing I would like to demonstrate is there is an example I would like to share, because a few days ago, I attended an esports seminar held in Zhejiang province, and where chief government officials from cyberspace administration, propaganda department, national radio and television administration, and administration of the sport, a few more were presented there, and almost all of them, except the sport administration and the radio television administration, thought esport was the same as the game. So I'm so surprised that or the funniest part I have observed is they were talking about esport from a parent perspective, and they feel like it does not develop the whole industry. So we see that there's still a lot of stigmatized power that uh, affect the whole industry. So I would strongly suggest to the young people, the professional players, to defend yourself about the surrounding has been stigmatized, and be professional, and think it seriously how to maintain and system your whole career, in particularly if you are still considered about a retired, you know, um, career path. So how to transform your skills from being professional player to a manager or coach or etc. So other important role in the whole industry, and we have to defend for ourselves. Be strong. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, professors. So now, I want to get from you is, what's the best ways to prepare your students with the right resume to get into the esports industry? But then also, as we talk about, the lifespan of professional esports players, what are the marketable skills, of these potential esports players outside of the esports industry in the case, they retire early, right? Please, now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think, one thing that, I would definitely highlight here is that the Overwatch events that took place in the summer for the University of Hawaii showcased ways in which, again, we decenter the player as the central focus of the ecosystem. With my students, I had 20 interns, and these interns were from our UH Esports program. And a lot of them were not players. A lot of them played supporting roles in our program. So we had students who did content creation, video editing, graphics, social media. And one of the goals of working with the Overwatch team in the Overwatch League was to have them interact with this organization, right? To interact with Activision Blizzard in a way in which they could learn the whole array of skills that takes to run a global league. And interestingly, these students, these interns, usually don't take a front role in our program. They actually are often in the background. And then it's usually the players who are often the face of our program. But with the Overwatch internship, it flipped. The actual players took a step back, and we had students that were from different majors, different degrees, different years in university, come and take a front position in the internship. And what they learned, again, as I go back to the example, the Overwatch League came to the University of Hawaii 5 different times. And each time they stayed for 1 week, from a Monday to a Friday. And that 1 week provided a spectrum of, of talents that was drawn from the students. So again, a Monday and Tuesday, we would have the IT people come in. They would set up the networks, they would set up the computer, they would do integrity checks, they would do communication checks. And then maybe a Tuesday and Wednesdays when the players came in, the professional teams would fly in from Los Angeles, Atlanta. They would come in, start to look at the different locations on campus to pick the rooms that they wanted. And so that drew on a very different skill set from the Monday and Tuesday, right? Monday and Tuesday was a very much IT based, but a Tuesday and Wednesday really didn't have much to do with IT per se, but had to do with soft skills. How do you talk with the players? How do you talk with the captains? How do you talk with the translators? You have to, a very interesting thing is that one of the biggest things that happened during the week was actually trying to negotiate with the players which room they wanted to stay in. They looked at the tables, they looked at the chairs. They would pick everything and be finical about everything that was in the room, not the computers. They would talk about chairs for at least an hour. And so what dawned on me is that, the entire esports industry is visible often because it is technologically sexy, right? It is new, it is fresh, it is up to date, it is the future. But when you actually operate at the global elite part of esports, what you understand is that these are just people. People with desires, people with ambitions, people who want to win ultimately, and you need people skills, right? You need to draw on 21st century people skills, which means that the students had to think globally. They had to be flexible, they had to be adaptive, right? If a player wanted to have a particular chair at a certain height, we had to go and figure out how to accommodate him as soon as possible, right? And so again, that was just midweek. And then of course, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, when we had the actual tournament. And that's when we saw the cherry on top when it came to this Overwatch League, and we got to watch as spectators, right? And so they got to spectate the game, we got to listen to comms, we got to see how broadcast works. And so again, going to your question of, how do we get kids into the industry? I think number one is that you introduce them to the whole array of talents and requirements and literacies that are required to make sure that they know that this is not just a player-centric activity, right? Once they understand that this really is a village that supports the players, right? This requires absolute collaboration across different skill sets. And again, I really emphasize these soft skill sets, because that was what made this, a success at the end. And so for me, to get kids into the industry is really to emphasize the diversity of knowledge that's needed.
Thank you now. So we have from the audience questions about, very relevant questions. It says, has COVID, the pandemic impacted, the development and interest in esports, gaming, and related skills development? Anyone from the panel? Tim, please.
Actually, it's done the reverse. Before, for the past 2.5 years, we have hosted more than 300 events, large and small, not including the daily streaming sessions in our office. Out of 300, I think 70% of the events took place after the lockdown. Because as I mentioned, people have nowhere to go. They have to turn indoor for their entertainment and etc. So at least helps us a lot in the global expansion.
Okay, Tim. Anyone from the panel? Anyone else?
You want to go, Sky?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat the question real quick?
Yes, has COVID impacted the development and interest in esports?
I mean, absolutely. It definitely has increased the attention and visibility of esports, and especially streaming as well. And for us, for the Overwatch League to come to the University of Hawaii was also because of the consequences of COVID. Because they wanted to go to a location that was safer and more open. It definitely does. But at the same time, we have to understand that not all gaming communities benefit equally across the board when it comes to COVID, right? Because some gaming communities flourish in face-to-face settings, where other gaming communities or gaming populations are built to be remote. And so it's yes, but it's also uneven.
Okay, thank you. I think we are running out of time, and it's time for me to, wrap up. And thank you for all these insightful sharing. What I've picked up from you is, to really ensure a sustainable development of the esports industry, we have to have this kind of balanced approach. Taking care of all these, mental wellness, and emphasize, on the esports industry value chain, which actually composes of not just a player-centric skills, but all these soft skills and hard skills that provide support to the back-end operation, project management, technology support, on top of all the player skills and training. And I hope, we do it together in a collaborative way, to ensure a healthy and sustainable development of this industry, and so as that all these passionate esports lovers could find a career, and job opportunities from this. And with that, I thank you. Thank all the panelists, for their sharing. And I've been told by the organizers that all the slides will be shared to all participants, even for those that we weren't able to show, during the panel. I think that will actually complete all these, knowledge sharing from our insightful panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chan, and for guiding us through a very interesting conversation. And thank you to all our panelists. For our next panel discussion, we will discuss gamification of social well-being. We would like to invite Ms. Jackie Wong to moderate this session. Joining her on stage is Professor Pei-Chi Chung, Associate Professor, Department of Cultural and Religious Studies, the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And virtually, we will have Professor Jim Huntley, Professor and Head of Marketing, USC Games Faculty Advisor, USC Trojan Esports, Executive Producer, USC Games Expo, Co-Founding Partner, PACU Gaming, University of Southern California, and Ms. Maike Jericho, Co-Founder and CEO at Tiramisu Script. We'll have a Q&A for this session. You may simply scan the QR code and type in your questions during the discussion. Ms. Wong, please.
Good morning, everyone. It's really lovely to see all the beautiful faces here with us today. And welcome to all of those that are joining us virtually. My name is Jackie Wong. I'm the Director of Network and Student Programs at the Association of Pacific Rim Universities. As mentioned in this morning's opening, one pillar of APRU's key objectives are to address important challenges across the Asia Pacific. This can range from climate change, diversity, equity, and inclusion, to preventing the next pandemic. We think that the games industry, and esports have a pivotal role to play in educating the wide range of gamers and players who will take action eventually, and in cleaning up the business process, making sure that our communities are inclusive and that everyone can participate. Earlier this morning, you heard from the UNEP about the Playing for the Planning initiative, which inspires the game industry to also get involved in conservation. We think that this is an excellent example for the game industry worldwide. So now in today's panel, we'll now elaborate on this discussion by bringing 3 experts who will share their perspectives on the gamification of social well-being. I'll begin with my esteemed colleague here with me today, Professor Pei-Chi Chung. She's the Associate Professor from the Department of Cultural and Religious Studies at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Professor Chung received her PhD from the Department of Telecommunication at Indiana University in Bloomington. Her teaching and research interests include new media and digital culture. In her teaching, she focuses on new development in media and cultural studies. She recently co-edited a book, Media Technologies for Work and Place in East Asia, Critical Perspectives Toward Japan and the Two Koreas. So now I introduce Professor Pei-Chi Chung. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Jackie, for the very wonderful introduction. And also thank you for APRU for inviting me here. Let me just get to my slide. Okay, so I would like to start with the title for the talk, very brief sharing of my idea on the gamification of social well-being in esports. Right. Before I start, I want to share a bit about my research context. In the past 12 years, I have been focusing on looking for a certain kind of model that can go beyond corporation, which I'll look into the public dimension to search for welfare, perspective to help the young talent in the game industry, especially for turning themselves from their passion into a game, becoming an indie game developer. So in that aspect, I kind of look into the creative talent perspective in creative industry. And in some way, I want to see then how they actually become the agent for transferring the local culture into a form of heritage preservation for their own culture. But on the other hand, I'm also interested in the development or conceptualization for esports education. It's because I find that this area is very relevant to me, and it's also becoming more and more important. So in some way, I'm thinking about how it actually can become we can provide certain kind of information sharing at the university to enhance the happiness of the young generation. In some way, how would that be serving as a kind of a platform for us to talk about social progress? So, okay, but then if we look at the way how esports industry has evolved, we actually also are seeing the kind of challenges that we're facing. In the earlier panel, there are a lot of discussions and viewpoints about the business development and how young, especially the young player in China, has been facing the very harsh, growingly harsh environment for playing esports. It's not just included, it's not just in China, it's also global. For example, if we look at World W organization, it actually officially recognized that video game addiction is a form of mental health, mental illness. So other than that aspect, but then during the pandemic, the WHO also recognized esports can be helping the pandemic control. So we are seeing the kind of boundary in the public dimension kind of shifting as the new situation evolves. So there are issues about like game violence and how esports can be participating one of the issues of a social problem. Women's game power, the misrepresentation of gender, and also a lot of psychological stress from the player. All right, so how do we face that kind of social challenges from the larger part of the society while we're also recognizing the personal struggle of a lot of esports players who are coming into the professional field? So it is very important to look at what things have happened and what kind of progress has evolved in the social practice of esports. So here I'm just using two examples here. That one is the Faker from South Korea, and the right one is the player called Gao Tianlia in China. Both of them actually, I think they are just two of a lot of similar kind of player who actually have struggled very far to make their own path in the esports industry. All right, so when we look at a certain kind of resolution to kind of pick up where we actually are facing for the moment, I find that maybe we need to kind of go beyond the current formula or territory esports to start thinking about some other issues in the larger context of video game industry, to think about the power of gamification to support the esport. We are seeing in the esports history, we have gone through three very interesting stages. The first one is the professionalization. The second one is turning with the streaming technology, how the market has taken off with many of the people involving in the spectatorship and also making esports into a home profession for the young talent. So what would be the next stage? I think it's also very interesting to think about the next stage, especially after the pandemic. So here I'm providing a couple concepts that scholars have talked about in a game study. For example, how we actually can design game to express the idea, how we can design game to enter the community, or design game for the girl power and to become more aware of the environmental issues and also to recognize game as an ideal environment to recognize nature. So these are all the issues that I will be very happy to talk more about in the future discussion. All right, so in conclusion, I just would like to end at the idea of computational creativity in the cultural space, how the data environment that's being modeled in the example eSport has been serving as a forefront when we see what will be coming in the data society in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chung. That's really helpful to hear, how students, how young people are struggling with the public perception of gaming and esports and their participation in it, balancing their mental health, but also having and finding their own self-fulfillment through gaming, and how the future of gaming and esports is more inclusive, will focus more on conservation, and will make a better future for everyone. So thank you. I now will turn to Professor Jim Huntley. He's the professor and head of marketing of USC Games. He's also the faculty advisor of USC Trojan Esports, and he's the executive producer of USC Games Expo, co-founding partner of PACU Gaming at the University of Southern California, my alma mater, and my personal hero, Jim Huntley. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. This is the first time I've been called someone's personal hero in an introduction, so I'll take it. Hey, everybody. My name is Jim Huntley. As Jackie mentioned, I'm a professor. I did not pay her to give me those accolades, by the way. I actually come by them through hard work and the bags under my eyes. I've been doing marketing for the last 25 years, everywhere from General Mills to Nestle, toy company Mattel, you might have heard of it, to THQ, a game publisher that's now called THQ Nordic and SodaStream. I've been a professor for around the last 5 years, and what I'm seeing from a trend, from a societal perspective when it comes to digital gaming and esports is probably three big ones that are affecting not just the world of gaming and esports, but us as a society overall. The democratization of entertainment, as I like to call it. I think back when I was in my 20s, and I think maybe a lot of us who are in an older demographic remember movie stars and celebrities, and you would watch the movies they starred in, and they would be on magazine covers. There were these things called magazines, kids, that were printed on paper that you would read articles about people. They were physical things. There were maybe 20, 30, 40 movie stars that captured all the headlines, and everything everybody did was always in print. And now, because of the democratization of entertainment, what this generation considers celebrities are YouTube celebrities and streamers. And the number and the fragmentation of that celebrity has been spread out to a larger base of people. And the people that build fandoms, they're much more and much more numerous, and have the ability to engage with their fan base much more directly than they ever did back when most of us were growing up and going through college. So because entertainment is becoming democratized, there's a lot more decentralization, which is building up, in a good way, digital communities. If I'm a huge fan of a particular music artist or streamer or gamer or even developer or designer, I can find a community thanks to the internet and Reddit and other websites and platforms like that that will let me interact with other people that also are huge fans of that talent that I love and appreciate, or that brand that I love and appreciate. I can find like-minded people and interact and engage with them. But I can also, in some cases, if that celebrity is engaged back with me, I can actually have a direct connection with them. So it's a brave new world where I can actually find people that love niches of things that I love. Where if I lived, anywhere in the United States or around the world, there might not be anyone that loves 1990s Japanese anime as much as I do, but thanks to the World Wide Web, I can find an entire audience of people that do love that, and I can find ways to engage with the creators of that type of content directly. I think that I always like to say to my clients when I'm consulting, as well as my students, that everyone's strength, or everything's strength, also tends to be its weakness. The fact that we can find communities that are like-minded and as like-minded as we are, there's a double-edged sword, because it also results in some fragmentation. When it comes to personal growth, we're seeing more and more that Even though we are all embracing the internet, or many of us are embracing the internet and the power that it provides us to build community, the downside to building that community is a level of fragmentation when it comes to our ability as humans, because even though the world, the technology has evolved, our bodies and our brains and how we think and process information hasn't really evolved as quickly. So our ability to focus on longer term projects and longer term goals has become somewhat eroded. We've fallen into the, I'd say, trap a little bit of looking for short term dopamine hits for what we're doing or what we're engaging in, and that's resulting in some people not being as goal oriented in this generation as I would say long term goal oriented in the younger generation that they were back in the day. Interpersonal engagement. There are people with myself included, with incredibly rich online lives with friends and acquaintances, and even reconnecting with family thanks to social media. But there is a trade-off of there's only so many hours in the day, and that digital connectivity that you get with the people that might live around the world or around the country. I'm talking to you all, from Los Angeles, California right now. But I've got, I and other people need to make sure we're maintaining those physical relationships in real life and not completely, living online. And I'd say engaging with society. I think we've had more than a few articles about the dark side of this fragmentation, this democratization, and being able to actually manipulate groups of people and pushing them to do things that normally they wouldn't do if they were engaging with people in the real world. So what's really cool is that we are becoming more engaged and more connected digitally with people around the world that are like us and that we can interact with and have a meaningful relationship with in ways we never could before. What we do need to make sure is that we're finding a balance, especially for the younger generation, between living that online life as well as making sure that you're still connected and engaged in a positive way with your offline life. What I'd say the other trend that I see, and I like to joke about it, but while we've all been living, we've also kind of, without meaning to, we've been playing a game. We pursue engagement and connectivity via social media, and our scorekeeping is likes and shares. Our money is increasingly on the blockchain. We are romantically connecting via dating and chat apps. We collect art now via NFTs. We invest with microtransaction stock purchase apps. So our world and how we interact with society in general is becoming more and more digitized and online. And we have to make sure that we are intentional about how we are having, the direction that we take that, and the I'd say teaching that we give to our students and our younger generation, to make sure that it's heading in a positive direction, because technology at its core is an amoral initiative. It doesn't really have a good or a bad side. We really have to put thought into what we're making and how we're making and how we're engaging with it. And I'd say what we're doing from a program perspective is just actively engaging with institutions and governments to make sure that that direction always tracks in a positive path, not a negative one or a neutral one, something that's going to be good for society and humankind as a whole, and not just a short-term hit. That's it.
Thank you, Professor Huntley. That's really helpful. And I don't take your warning lightly. We can live full lives online. We can, as you say, date and collect art. But we also need to be careful about the danger of being isolated and making sure that we still live our lives fully in real life. I'll now turn to Ms. Maika Garika. She's the co-founder and CEO of Tiramisu at Script. She's also the author of The Rise of the Wildlife Gamer, How Game Experiences Can Influence the Future of Conservation Interest. Ms. Maika Garika, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello everyone, and so good to be here. So I'm basically, quickly to introduce myself, I'm the co-founder of an innovation studio that is called Script, and a resulting venture that is called Tiramisu, which is what we call a social network of kindness. And my background is basically being an innovator, a business strategist, and a human-centered designer that is focused on working in the technology sector for a while, but since 4 years is really focused on using technology for social and environmental impact. And what I've done in the last year, especially since COVID started, because that's also when my project Tiramisu started, is the topic of reimagining social media and digital communities, and looking at well-being as a key component in that. And in the last year also, I dove very deeply into the opportunity of gaming for both nature interest and conservation outcomes, together with a game studio that is called Internet of Elephants that already released least 6 wildlife themed and really wildlife focused, conservation focused games, and with the Luke Hoffman Institute, which is an entity of the World Wildlife Fund. So a key question that I've been asking myself in all of this is basically, what is the role that our environment and that our well-being plays in our virtual future? And that is a bit of the red thread in all of this. And what I see is that basically, and as my four speakers already said, games and virtual networks are increasingly taking over a lot of these aspects of our daily lives that we otherwise would have done in the real world. And when it comes to the younger generations, and especially, for example, the now Generation Z, which is now 16 to 24 years old, a lot of the socializing is actually happening in social media and through games, and there are a little bit of gender differences in which group is actually preferring to socialize. But we also see a lot of people that are not necessarily regular gamers that are really going to these environments to connect. And so games have a lot of opportunity there also for really varied kind of interaction and for a much more complete kind of interaction. And the metaverse, in the end, that everyone is talking about, to me, is also a place where those two worlds collide, where they become more seamlessly interwoven also with our physical experiences. And so when I look at the future of that, I can basically see two scenarios. One is where we are increasingly getting disconnected from our virtual worlds, from our physical world, where we're spending all our time on screen, where we are missing out on real social connections, and where we are basically getting more and more disconnected from nature. Or I can see the other perspective, where games are enriching our real world experiences, and where the actions and benefits of those two worlds are interlinked, and where nature is becoming a part of that experience. And then there can be really links between those worlds, where, for example, we can buy responsible products in a supermarket and we get rewarded with credits that we can then use in a game. Or where our gameplay is encouraging us to do good, where we need to move and run in order to unlock new levels and basically be part of the experience. And where we can also get some world knowledge that comes to us through these games. So I'm personally an optimist, so I'm very excited about the second scenario. And I also think that we as technologists and as game developers, I think there is a big responsibility in making sure that we are positively and not negatively impacting the life of coming generations, and that we also play a role in the preservation of our planet, because there is a lot at stake. And I think initiatives like the Playing for the Planet initiative are such a great example of how this can actually work. And then when I think also looking at this panel, at this conference, a little bit looking at the collaboration between universities and the gaming sector, I think there is a lot of opportunity there in order to really understand the impact and really measure the impact that actually games have for well-being. That's one thing, basically defining measures of well-being, really looking at what is the actual experience doing to our well-being and personal health. And on the other hand, there is also a lot of opportunity to look into the effects that it actually has on, for example, our perception of nature. So as an example, Internet of Elephants was just doing a randomized control trial where they basically identified that one of their games has similar outcomes than a wildlife documentary in actually raising an awareness and knowledge and attitudes and donation behaviors within people. And then I think another part is really also about gamifying education experience, because there is so much entertainment and fun and learning opportunity in games that I think that should be really used in practice. And the other part, and I think that that's something that we've already been hearing a lot in the previous panel, is this topic of people-centric design, because students are the next generation that are the users of games currently, and they should also play a key role in the creation of those games. So through my work with Tiramisu, I had a lot of opportunity to talk to students and student clubs in various universities and in different areas of the world. And what I got to see is basically a lot of young people that are extremely motivated and extremely caring about social and environmental issues, but are often also very uncertain about where they can place their action, where they can place their activity. And I see basically a really big opportunity in using games and raising this awareness, guiding knowledge, and starting also action in the real world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Micah. Your points are well taken. The pandemic turned the education industry upside down and really inspired, and I think it really opened up our idea of what education can look like. So I like the idea of gamifying education as well. Professor Chung, I would like to invite all of our speakers to come back for a bit of question and answer here. So, Professor Chung, you talked about the stereotypes, and this is something that we heard about in the first panel as well. And you also mentioned there's new opportunities with emerging technologies, with the metaverse, blockchain, and others that can really help us to change the perception of esports and the gaming industry. And I think that it would be really helpful for us to hear from you more about the ways that players can overcome these stereotypes and how we can work together on defending the industry and our work in it.
Okay, thank you. I think we are in a very interesting turning point, especially we see how the esports industry, the progress has been making, has been very fast. So one of the issues for overcoming all this stereotype, I think we have to look into the way that how playing esports can encourage the young player to have more connection with the local community. In some way to kind of balance, as the speaker, Professor Williams, was saying, the balance in between the online and offline. That's also the responsibility for designing for an ideal virtual world. It's the responsibility for the corporation, it's a responsibility for everybody. Overall, we're creating an environment that's going to be for the young generation to spend a lot of time every day when they are playing the game. So how we actually can put heritage and also engagement with the local community in the playing of the esport will be one thing that all of us can consider. And I'm also seeing with the emerging technology, there's also this transmedia turn that playing game is not just within one platform. Sometimes there can be, for example, like in League of Legends, the game, recently there's an animation that came out as a kind of background to support the player when they are playing the game. They will be able to identify to enter this immersive scenario. So within that kind of process, how can we put in, for example, gender equality and also racial equality, that kind of mindset to put into the production process? It will actually help a lot with the balance of the current problem of having so many stereotypes on race, class, and gender. So I think that's the potential. And then if you look at the whole history of esports, we see how it's emerging from the geek culture into the growingly visibly mainstream culture. So this kind of techno dimension will certainly leave a lot of opportunity and potential for us to further develop. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly we know that representation matters, and representation in games and of the players is really important in making sure that we all feel that we are included in this industry. Professor Huntley, I know that USC has done a lot to address gender equity, inclusion, even climate change through the games department there. And what I know about the USC Games Department is one of the only games academic programs in the APRU network. And I know it's multidisciplinary, it's multifaceted, and it'd be really good to hear from you all that USC has done to address these important topics within the curriculum?
Absolutely. So, our USC Games program has diversity in its DNA. The way our program is structured is somewhat unique. That's why we've been ranked #1 for the last 12 years in terms of games program in North America. But we are split between the USC School of Cinematic Arts and USC's Viterbi School of Engineering, because it takes the art and science coming together to make a really engaging and compelling interactive and gaming experience. And our student body, I like to joke that we've been focused on diversity before diversity was cool. We've been 55% women, female, non-binary for over a decade now. So we've been kind of living and breathing this. And I've only been here for 5 years, so I certainly can't take credit for it, but our program's been living and breathing this for a very long time. So it's great to see the world catch up with what we've been doing for a while now. But because we are a hybrid between engineering and cinema, we're focused on combining tech and storytelling, and we're constantly challenging our students to tell unique stories, to give us experience and points of view that we haven't seen before. My background's in marketing, and when I first got here, I would have some of the students come in and go, "Oh, you're the marketing guy. You want the mass market, big shooter, first-person shooters." Like, really what I want is something unique. I want something I've never played before or seen before. That's really what, if I'm going to put my marketing hat on, that's what really sells. Giving me an experience that I haven't encountered before is the thing that's going to break through the clutter versus doing another cookie cutter version of another game that's out there. A couple of examples, or a few examples. We had a game last year featured in our USC Games Expo from an MFA student called Alma, which was the protagonist in that game was a Cuban American nurse who was trying to balance her life as a nurse and working during the pandemic. So it was very real time and in the real world. There's a game called Plasticity that we had a few years ago that was all about conservation and the impact of going green, where the player was able to move back and forth in time and see what the impact was of her actions in the past, how that might impact her environment in the future. There's a game called Our America that we featured 2 years ago in our USC Games Expo that happens every May. That was all about being an African American in the US during a police stop, and the different paths that player in a VR environment, the choices that they might make and how that might impact the end of that stop, which usually, unfortunately, based on real life, it ends in tragedy. As well as, there's a game we haven't even announced yet that will be showcasing, it's in my class, the Advanced Games Project class, AGP, the little icon in the background here, that will be showcasing this May, that's all about social anxiety. So students are creating games and meaningful experiences that they want to not only show the world to express themselves, but it's about topics that they find important. Related to that, we're involved in the Global Climate Jam that we've hosted the last year or two. We are sponsors of the Game Devs of Color that happens in Los Angeles. And then we've absolutely been able to send a handful of students for the very first time to an organization called Able Gamers. It's all about improving accessibility for video games. So it's an exciting time for making sure that we've got diversity, equity, inclusion in the forefront of what we do and what we're encouraging our students to engage in. I say encouraging with a chuckle because we are supporting them, but they're the ones driving it. The fact that younger generation, as Maika mentioned, like it's the younger generation that's driving a lot of this. Hey, we want to go do this stuff, and we're like, great, we want you to, and we want to give them the tools to be able to succeed and bring our art form and bring our industry into these new areas so that we can experiment and make sure that we're staying relevant with future generations.
Well, that is a lot. We really thank USC for really shaping the students' experiences. And I know when I was at USC, I was really grateful for having those opportunities to pursue my dreams and to know that I was welcomed in different spaces. I'd like also to follow up with Micah. I know that through your research, you have made an analysis about the potential of reaching, why do video games, why is that a good medium for us to reach players, to educate our population around conservation and wildlife protection?
Yeah, so it's been actually a really interesting experience doing this research because we really looked into audience data, and we basically did some analysis of data from the Global Web Index, and we looked into basically really who are the audiences that are really interested in wildlife as a kind of basis of this project that we were doing, and what we've been finding has been actually really astonishing to me, just to the extent of the numbers that we actually found in terms of who are the people that care about conservation or related topics. So if I can just give a couple of the things. So those are basically numbers of internet users. And we basically saw that there's 1.1 billion people that care about wildlife in basically internet users. And a lot of them are under 40 years old, and 70% of them are already gamers that engage in games at least once per week. We had 1.2 billion people that want to contribute to their communities and want to help the environment. 74% of them are gamers. 1.4 billion people actively build healthy habits. 70% of them are gamers. And then there's also other groups like pet owners, like people that regularly go outdoors, like people that are parents and care about the future of their kids. So all of these groups and all of these people care about wildlife and conservation to some extent already. And so for me, it has been a really interesting realization to see that including basically wildlife and nature into game experiences, and then I'm speaking a little bit as a marketer, but it's basically not just something that you would add on top of a game experience just to do something for a good cause, but it's actually something that the people are already wanting and already readily caring about. And to me, that is changing a little bit the perspective of the importance of how important is it actually to have this kind of content in games. And then when we're also looking at for example, who has access to readily go outside and go into the world and go into nature and go into the environment. We also see that for a lot of people that grow up in urban settings, that grow up maybe with less family income, this is actually an opportunity that they might not have. So games can play also a really important role in opening up this world of nature, of conservation, to groups that might otherwise not be able to experience that. And then the other part of it is also then the topic of why do people play, and we see it very much that younger generations, so Gen Z, are really focused a lot on learning and on socialization, and when we get a little bit older, it's then a lot more also about socializing, but also about this kind of escaping from your real world situation, which I think has been a lot of a topic also during the pandemic. And so really getting this understanding has been helping me also a lot to really understand and look at the importance that conservation and nature plays in these kind of roles, but in the gaming world, but also really the opportunity of how many people are readily there and are readily willing to engage on these topics.
Thank you so much, Micah. I'm getting the signal that we have to close, so I'm very sorry that our time together was so short. So please join me in thanking our excellent panelists today who shared important insights on the gaming and esports industry, how roles for gamers and business and conservation and wildlife protection and strategies for universities consider in supporting students in reshaping the industry so that we can ensure that the future represents the community that is a part of it and that is so dedicated to building the culture. So please join me in thanking our panelists today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wong, and thank you to all our panelists. As part of the second Metagame Conference, APRU and Cyberport hosted the APRU Student Esports Paper Competition. We are now proud to present the finalists who will give a short summary presentation of their papers. After the presentations of each category, you, the audience, will vote for your favorite paper and decide the winner in each category. Please join me to welcome Professor Chong to chair this session. Professor Chong, please.
Okay, so the APRU Student Esports Paper Competition welcome papers from undergraduate students across the Asia-Pacific region in 3 categories. Business model for esports industry, esports for social good, and health wellness in esports. The purpose of the paper competition is to support esports as an academic area of study. We will encourage students to have innovative and quality research in the esports field, as well as promote the long-term investment of esports research, which will enrich students and university resources and college knowledge resources in the emerging field. We congratulate all the students who participated in the competition from 8 universities from Hong Kong, Russia, the Philippines, Singapore, Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Winning student in each category will win a 3,000 USD scholarship or a 1,000 cash prize, as well as be published in the International Journal of Esports. The runner-up prize in each category has the choice of USD 1,000 scholarship or USD 300 cash prize. I would like to thank all of the judges for their contribution to the development of this competition, for giving their time to review paper. Mr. Tim Dorr, Head of Education, British Esports Association. Mr. Terence Leong, Senior Manager, Esports and Youth Team, Hong Kong Cyberport Management Company Limited. Mr. Timothy Sen, Founder and Investor, Yes Sports East Media Limited. Dr. Aaron Koch, Chief Editor, International Journal of Esports. Mr. Sherman Chen, APRU Secretary. So after each category is presented, our audience will have the opportunity to help choose the winner. I now welcome our finalists in the category of business model for the esports industry to present their papers. First, I welcome Team 1. The title of the paper is Two Islands in the Pacific. The student is Rain Sheki from the University of Hawaii and Manoa in the United States.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Just a quick introduction. My name is Ren Seki. I'm a student at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I've been following esports for almost a decade, and also even had the opportunity a few years ago to compete professionally under a North American team called Immortals. So my paper was titled Two Islands in the Pacific, and it was focused on the islands of Hawaii and Guam, 2 locations that have never really been in the conversation of global esports, but recently have been able to find a spot in the esports industry. So esports in general has taken the world by storm and has become a dominant entertainment industry, with countries such as China and Korea at the forefront, and the USA and select countries in Europe right behind them. But we don't really see much international competition or collaboration because there's big oceans, mountains that are separating these different regions. And these islands, Guam and Hawaii, have been ways that we've been able to compete cross-region without having to worry about latency or ping, which are big variables within esports. So right now we only see things like League of Legends Worlds held only once or twice a year because of this issue with ping and latency that hold back competition across regions. So with the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a lot of sports and esports kind of struggle to adapt because of international kind of competition and in-person competition kind of get halted. So esports was different and it was able to adapt. So one example was the Overwatch League. And for those who don't know, the Overwatch League is the game Overwatch, their professional league, and they were able to continue consistent international play before many, if not all, other esports titles. And this was only possible because of Hawaii and the University of Hawaii at Manoa. They were able to utilize an underwater sea cable, which led from Hawaii to Japan, to kind of play on a Japanese server in Asia and connect with teams in Asia on the same ping from Hawaii. And this hasn't been done before. And the accomplishment isn't just being able to compete with teams across the ocean, but the accomplishment is that they're able to compete fairly at the same latency across the ocean cross region. And although not all games can take advantage of this, such as Valorant or League of Legends, which are very heavily reliant on low ping or low latency, games that can utilize this, such as Overwatch, should look to utilize Hawaii's unique location more. So in Guam, there's been another development that has been slowly progressing, but has gone rather unnoticed, and that's the development of like a super server in Guam, which would allow different countries in Asia to connect to a server in Guam, like a centralized server, instead of having to connect to one server across Asia at the sacrifice of one team playing at a really high latency compared to the other, which wouldn't be fair at all. So as an example of what is possible, the people behind OneCode hosted a small CSGO tournament a few months ago just to test the server out. And one of the biggest moments they said was when two teams about 3,000 miles away were able to play at just under 90 ping, and everyone was able to play at that ping, even though they were separated by 3,000 miles. And that's unprecedented, that's unheard of, and it's never happened before. So the Hawaiian Islands and Guam have showed that they are able to use their unique locations for competitions to take place across numerous different countries. And with Hawaii allowing for cross-region competition across the Pacific Ocean and Guam allowing for different countries within Asia, they compete against each other at fair ping or fair latency. So for almost the entire lifetime of esports, places such as Guam and Hawaii have been left out of global esports discussions because of their notoriety for having high latency. But they were able to find their own niche in the industry instead of having to wait years and years for the technology and infrastructure to develop, which would allow them to partake in the esports industry naturally like other places. So this technology that's allowing for this cross-region competition is still developing, and it's really exciting to think about the future of online competition between different countries and regions, because right now it's only the beginning and the floodgates have been opened. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan, for the very interesting presentation. I now welcome Team 2. The title of the paper is Paving the Road in University. The student's name is Zachary McKay from the University of British Columbia, Canada.
Perfect. Thank you, Professor Chung. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and members of the APRU Esports Fellowship, it is my honor to speak to you today at the MetaGame Conference about my work. My paper was inspired by the work that I have witnessed and contributed to as a member of University Esports at the University of British Columbia for the past 5 years. Turning to the content of the piece, the focus is placed on the variety of business models that exist for university esports groups, as well as the ways in which companies and students stand to benefit from partnerships in this space. In the introduction, I list an example of how in the professional esports scene, successful company executives like Rachel Hofstetter, co-owner of 100 Thieves, has been recognized broadly for the successful endeavors that they have spearheaded, such as in the Forbes 30 under 30 list. It is well known that the youth of today are most keenly aware of and engage with various parts of the gaming industry, and esports has matured to a point where major investment in the tens of millions of dollars from non-endemic brands is now commonplace. These companies began as startups, and university esports groups have evolved along a similar trajectory and mirror the structural composition of professional esports brands in many ways. My goal is to accurately portray the similarities between university esports groups and professional companies, and highlight the importance that university esports groups, like the ones that students here today are a part of, are an invaluable resource for this growing industry. Make no mistake, there is an incredible amount of value that esports companies can generate. Having passionate, engaged fans of your brand is one of the greatest wishes for any company. And esports organizations have this as a foundational feature of any successful endeavor. Now, the supposed difficult part comes in finding capable individuals who have the experience and understanding to work for and run companies like 100 Thieves smoothly, in a field with little history or a traditional pathway in training or education for the skills necessary to succeed. Enter university esports groups, which are built to provide the same experiences and work in an identical manner as professional esports organizations on a localized scale. Student leaders, by necessity, are given the experiences needed to succeed in the professional scene, with work including product management, event production and organization, marketing and graphic design work, player management, and almost any other division that you can expect in a professional brand. Moving on, I look to compare some of the most successful university esports groups. Aiden Tidwell, whose in-game name is Niles, was a product of the Maryville University esports program, having won the University League of Legends Championships in 2019 before signing with the Golden Guardians in 2021 as their starting top laner in the League of Legends Championship Series. Maryville University focuses heavily on investing financial and administrative support into their esports program's competitive teams, with a well-established scholarship model for students to benefit from while competing in games representing the school. In contrast to this heavy investment, other organizations like the UBC Esports Association have benefited from 10 years of history as a student-run organization and enjoyed both competitive success and the growth of their student community to over 3,500 members. Despite the distinctly different financial model from Maryville University, the University of British Columbia has benefited from a structured organization modeled after businesses. Shifting towards the marketing opportunities in university esports groups, I identified the challenges that companies and brands face today in reaching a lucrative demographic, young adults in their late teens and early 20s. The consumption of information on social media has been a generational shift in how advertisements reach or fail to reach their target audiences. University esports groups are immensely valuable for their ability to consistently reach this audience and in a setting that they enjoy and frequently interact in. University groups, in return, receive much needed financial support and the legitimacy of brand recognition thanks to the companies that they work with. Experience in establishing, negotiating, and managing major partnership agreements is something that is a unique asset for university esports groups. The skills that in other fields require months or years of training on the job are already built into individuals who have worked in universities groups. In summary, my paper is intended to provide a clear picture of where university esports is positioned in the larger professional industry of gaming and esports, and how value can be gained from investment and support of student groups with the aim of paving a road to successful careers in the esports industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now begin the voting for the category of business models for the esports industry. You have 2 minutes to vote for your favorite paper. Please use the QR code and shortened URL on the screen to cast your vote. And the 2 minutes starts now. 1 minute left. Not long now, you have 30 seconds. Hurry up and cast your votes. Ten seconds. Okay, time's up. Next, we will have the presentations from the next category. We will now calculate the results, which is decided by both our judges and the audience. Professor Chung, please.
Okay, now let's move to the second session. I want to welcome our finalists in the category of esports for social goods. The first team is women's experience of sexism and objectification in the esport and gaming community. The students are Gabukova Laysan, Saprun Elizaveta, Malenkova Elizaveta from the Far Eastern Federal University in Russia.
Hello. My name is Elizaveta Supron, and I represent the team from Far Eastern Federal University, Russia. Today, I would like to talk about women's experience of sexism and objectification in the esports and gaming community. Video gaming is one of the most thriving entertainment industries, with nearly 730 million players in the US, Europe, and Southeastern Asia. Over 45% of game players in the US and Europe identify as female and regularly face sexualization and objectification in the gaming community. According to the American Psychological Association, sexualization occurs when a person's value is defined by her or his sexual appeal or behavior. Any other characteristics are overlooked. We can see this problem in many aspects. For example, female protagonists are rare in games, and even if they appear, they are mostly heavily sexualized. Moreover, they are usually the ones in need of help or saving. They are so-called damsel in distress too. Most female models lack body diversity and tend to have hyper-realistic bodies. More than that, female models are often given too revealing and impractical outfits. They are unfit for the game background and context, while male characters appear fully clothed. In the 50 best video game characters of all time list made by Esquire, only 4 characters are female, and 2 of them are the most iconic representations of female body sexualization. But it is not only game developers. Players are a part of the problem too. Even though, as it was mentioned earlier, women make up almost half of the gaming community, esports is still mostly considered a male-dominated field. Because of that, female online video game players often experience negative feedback and sexual harassment from male players. Moreover, though male and female gamers' performance in online games is equally good, male players tend to call into question women's gaming skills, which leads to women being excluded from esports and struggling to prove their skill level. The prevalence of gender-specific expectations becomes clear in situations such as a League of Legends match between a high-profile all-female team called Team Siren and all-male team called OMG Ranked 5s. Not only OMG Ranked 5's members insulted Team Siren's playing, but also male team Underplayed falling into greed attacking without resorting to usual strategic standards because they did not take the all-female opponent team as a serious challenge. When OMG Ranked 5s realized they were going to lose the match, their discussion focused on embarrassment and negative impact to their reputation. Not only women's skills are underestimated and sometimes mocked, but also female gamers must deal with objectification and sexual harassment. Recent studies show that sexual harassment comments directed toward female streamers were observed at 11 times the percentage of those directed toward male streamers. Such comments not only adversely affect their performance but also have negative implications on women's self-esteem and mental well-being, and contribute to a generally hostile attitude toward female gamers in the community. In the field of professional esports, there is also a lot of injustice toward the female half of the audience. From the whole amount of prize money won by esports gamers, only a small portion belongs to women. The difference might be explained by the fact that female championships are poorly promoted, and therefore such smaller prizes make it harder for women to upgrade their gaming gear, fully concentrate on developing skills, and successfully continue their esports career. If we look at the field of mobile games where women do dominate in, there is also a problem with objectification and lack of representation. The Why We Play survey took by Google Play shows that because of many factors like over-sexualized game advertisement, female characters design, lack of diversity and plot, numerous female mobile gamers feel underrepresented and think that less than 30% of mobile games are made for women. It leads to fewer women joining esports teams and only playing games as their hobby. It is logical to assume that women discrimination and sexualization is a systematic problem that has no connection with how many men or women there are in games. Women face quite a lot of troubles in gaming, be it lack of adequate representation, injustice in professional esports, and unequal distribution of awards, questioning their skills as players, and even sexual objectification and harassment. Interactions that emphasize hostility may discourage them from pursuing esports and affect their views on their own abilities and their actual performance. To overcome this, esports players and sponsors should join forces to create a healthy, safe, and inclusive environment for all players, regardless of gender, nationality, race, sexual orientation, and other aspects. Thank you for your attention.
Very good. Now I welcome Team 2 for the second category. The title is Esports Legacy for Social Good. The student's name is Caden McKay from the University of British Columbia, Canada.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to thank APRU for this opportunity. As Professor Chung just said, I'm Caden McKay from the University of British Columbia, and I'm more than happy to share my paper on esports legacy. Esports means a lot to me, as I'm sure it does many of you, and while it's had its fair share of controversy, I believe esports is where true diversity can thrive. And especially with what happened during 2020, esports has never played a larger part in connecting people. First, I'd like to talk about esports' fight against mental illness. Depression and mental illness as a whole are pretty rampant in esports as a scene, with the National Institute of Mental Health Disorders saying 29.4% of young adults aged 18 to 25 and 25% of those aged 26 to 49 suffer from at least one mental illness. And according to Jay Clement, over 50% of the gaming population falls within this age range. So I'd like to say it's pretty important. And we can look at people like Brian Rexfeld Bernson, Gosu, Ali Grosgor Larson, who are all streamers and figures of the community, and they've spoken about their battle with mental illness on their streams. I'd also like to talk about Misfits, which is an NA-based organization, but has a lot of EU-based teams, and they've realized it's not just their players whose mental health they should care about, but also their staff. So they've started programs to help all staff members and provide access to mental health care for everyone on their team. I'd also like to I also talked about Play with Heart, which is a Smash event hosted by UBC Esports Association, and we raised money for charity for mental health research. And it just goes to show what APRU students and what university students can really do. Now on to the second point in my essay. It was, while the highest level of play is still mostly full of men, women have certainly dominated their respective esports. So it talked about Seong Guguri Kim, the first female Overwatch player, who dealt with sexism and cheating accusations at the age of only 17. She then went on to play for the Shanghai Dragons. She would have 5 first place finishes on her time there and become recognized as one of the best in her role. And secondly, I talked about Sarah Scarlett Holston, the first woman and first trans woman in StarCraft 2 to win a major. She represented Canada in Intel Extreme Masters Season 12, which was an event sponsored by the International Olympic Committee and took place less than a week before the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. And thirdly, I talked about true multiculturalism in esports. And while there's been a lack of it in PC gaming, you can turn to FGC with Arslan Ash Siddiq, who really brought Pakistan onto the scene for esports gaming and the Tekken community in what is traditionally very South Korean and Japanese dominated. And then the Dominic Sonic Fox McClain, who's an American non-binary FGC player. You really have to say FGC player because they've won over 5 unique titles. And they can be seen donning their iconic blue tail and fox ears at events. So yeah, as Professor Chung said, diversity is more than just including one group. It's being accepting of all groups. And while my presentation today was very brief, each of these players deserves their own speech, truly, because they've all had fantastic and one-of-a-kind stories. And this is the foundation that esports built. This is what, as students, as APRU members, and as people, this is like what we can help build. So thank you all for coming out today.
Thank you. We will now begin the voting for the category of Esports for a Social Good. You have again 2 minutes to vote for your favorite paper. Please use the QR code and shortened URL on the screen to cast your vote. The time starts now. One minute left. Only 30 seconds left. Seconds more. Okay, time's up. Next, we'll have presentations from the next category. Professor Chung, please.
Thank you. Now we would like to welcome our finalists in the category of health wellness in esports. I would like to welcome the first one, Team 1, with the title of Psychological Impacts of Esport Gaming, a detriment or a lifetime in disguise. The student's name is Rosarita Riwan de Cruz. It's from National University of Singapore in Singapore. Rosarita, you are muted.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Rosa Rita Ridwan de Cruz, and I'm a student from the National University of Singapore. In my essay, The Psychological Impacts of Esports Gaming, a Detriment or Lifeline in Disguise, I discussed the various effects of being a competitive gamer on one's mental health in the esports industry. As of today, esports has attracted the attention of millions of gamers worldwide. Tournaments are spectated through live events and through media platforms such as Twitch and YouTube. In recent years, esports events have experienced an increase in viewership. And as the industry continues to thrive, this entices more casual gamers to take the opportunity to venture out to competitive gaming. In this industry, gamers would experience being part of an inclusive community, such as connecting with other players and having the chance to improve on their gaming skills. However, there is a pressing issue of the mental demands of this industry, which leads us to the question, what are the psychological impacts of esports gaming? Behind the rush and the thrills of competitive gaming, esports can impact players on a psychological level, both negatively and positively. In an elite and highly competitive environment, esports athletes are prone to face issues such as burnout, depression, anxiety, addiction, and aggression due to various stresses such as the pressure to perform well and excessive gaming. High stress levels surface when players strive for optimal performance in front of large, potentially tough crowds, and when they face communication issues with teammates. Additionally, demoralization and the difficulty in keeping games and personal life separate can lead to excessive gaming. During intense matches, players may be overwhelmed by their emotions. Close games may leave them feeling agitated with an overpowering thought of not being good enough. Moreover, social life distress has been shown to be associated with excessive gaming, giving rise to confidence issues and uncertainty in career paths. And this mentality can have an adverse effect on the player's psychological state. In contrast, studies also show that gaming can enhance players' memory, information processing, concentration, and problem-solving skills. This hones adaptability, flexibility, and attentiveness. Furthermore, esports gaming has been reported to alleviate many gamers' social isolation issues and provide a welcoming environment to foster meaningful social relations, and this can benefit their mental health and possibly instill a positive mindset. To drive the esports industry to greater heights, psychological training initiatives to safeguard the gamer's mental health should be fostered, and further studies should focus on the various mental stresses that players face. Coaches should also play a role in helping to identify any onsets of mental distress in players and aid them in their journey to achieve optimal performance. Thus, while esports does not necessarily lead to mental health issues, acknowledgement of distress coupled with proper guidance and coping strategies can allow players to have a successful and meaningful career in esports. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosarita. Now we want to come to the last presentation, and I would like to welcome Team 2 with the title of Esports, Motivation and Life Goals. The students' names are Lian Yangxin, Xia Kiela, Manking Chuan James from the National University of Singapore.
Good morning, everyone. I'm James, and my fellow teammates are Kela and Yanxing. We are a trio of Year 2 students from the National University of Singapore, and we're presenting our report on how the motivations behind playing esports are related to the life goals that people want to fulfill. We'll start off by following Wagner's definition of esports as an area of sports activities in which people develop and train mental or physical abilities in the use of information and communication technologies. Just as how many traditional sports require teamwork and commitment, our definition of esports players are those who practice frequently with their team members for a competitive video game, as opposed to casual solo players who diversify their time over multiple games. Our paper contends that one engages in esports primarily to fulfill certain life goals that are deemed to be unachievable in one's physical life. Moreover, in light of the current pandemic, we will also be looking into how COVID-19 influences the relationship between esports gaming and achieving one's life goals, given that it has already restructured almost every aspect of our lives in the last 2 years. For the life goals they are referring to, we will be using the goals framework by Coleman and Brunstein to establish them. Their model measures 6 types of life goals, 2 of which our paper mainly focuses on, namely affiliation and diversion.
Prior research by Banya and colleagues found that players who engage in esports are primarily driven by the need for sociability. So, what exactly is sociability? Sociability is defined by the APA Dictionary of Psychology as the tendency and skills required for seeking out companionship, engaging in interpersonal relations, and participating in social activities. Similarly, Matonchik's research revealed that players found the in-game social interactions in multiplayer esports more desirable than solo gameplay. Specifically, deepening one's sociability and interpersonal relations online enables one to fulfill the life goals of affiliation and diversion, as shown by how esports players scored significantly higher in these life goal categories than casual players. So what exactly is affiliation? Affiliation refers to the quantity and quality of interactions between an individual and others. Gaming communities for competitive games, such as CSGO, are known as affinity spaces because of the ample opportunities provided for players to interact and bond over their common interests in competitive gaming. This reinforces one's affiliation and sense of belonging in such communities. Affiliation can also be realized in instances where one engages in esports alongside friends in the same team through the desire for in-group bonding or peer pressure. Games with competitive factors enable players to experience greater sociability through fostering a stronger desire amongst players to outperform their opponents, encouraging strategic team coordination, thus promoting communication which facilitates social interactions amongst team members. Diversion refers to one's needs to divert oneself from routine tasks to seek novel experiences. As the conduct of physical activities such as traveling are highly discouraged or even interdicted in many countries as part of COVID-19 safety measures, many homebound people may instead turn to exploring virtual multiplayer worlds in esports, such as those in MMORPGs. This is to simulate the novel experience of traveling to new countries and meeting new people. Multiplayer esports promote sociability by bringing players in from different parts of the world together within the virtual realm, thus exposing players to new experiences in their social interactions with people of different backgrounds, which in turn fulfill the life goal of diversion. This also applies to non-gamers who recently turned their attention towards video games and esports during the pandemic. Professional esports players may also rotate from one game to another during COVID-19 due to the need for unique gaming experiences. Many prominent CSGO players have migrated to Valorant due to its potential for content creation, as well as the more immersive gaming experience that it offers. The novel gameplay experience that Valorant offers is just one amongst the plethora of evidence of the fluid nature of esports. The diversity and generativity of video games renders it difficult for players to feel dissatisfied or bored, given that there are always other options to divert to.
Our report focused mainly on how sociability achieved the goals of affiliation and diversion, as prior research has found that it was the greatest motivator for esports participation. However, other possible motivators for esports should also be acknowledged, like ambition and escapism. Ambition can spur players to achieve better performances in their games, and in some cases, even making money or a career out of gaming, which contributes to the attainment of other life goals such as achievement and power. Escapism can be another reason why people pursue esports, as games function as an avenue to relieve stress and as a respite from the daily life and work. In conclusion, we find that the goals framework by Pullman and Bernstein has currently untapped potential as a model and tool to help us understand the motivations behind the field of esports. The effects of COVID should understandably always be kept in consideration in modern research, especially with regards to esports. Further research also could look into specific aspects of different game genres in cultivating affiliation and diversion. Lastly, we should remember not to fall for the misconception that esports consists solely of video games, as esports can broadly refer to any shared digital space for people to interact and conduct joint activities, similar to playing sports or spectating matches physically. That concludes our presentation, and we thank you for your kind attention. These are our references.
Thank you very much. We will now begin the voting for the category of health wellness in esports. Again, for the last time, you have 2 minutes to vote for your favorite paper. Please use the QR code again and shorten URL on the screen to cast your vote. 2 minutes starts now. One minute left. 10 seconds. Okay, time's up. Thank you, Professor Chung, and to all of our presenters. Thank you so much for all of your votes. We have the results. I would like to invite Mr. Terence Sloan, Senior Manager, Esports and Youth Team, Hong Kong Cyberport Management Company Limited, to announce the winner for the category of Business Models for the Esports Industry. Mr. Leung, please.
Thank you all for your votes. My great pleasure to be here. I'd like to announce the result now. The winner of the APRU Student Esports Paper Competition 2021 in the category of business models for the esports industry is Paving the Road, Exploring Esports Models and Marketing Opportunities in University. Paper written by Secretary McKay, UBC, Canada. The trophy is for you. Congratulations.
Congratulations, and thank you very much, Mr. Leung. Then I would like to invite, again, Professor Pei Chi Chung, Associate Professor, Department of Cultural and Religious Studies, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and the Chair of APRU Student Esports Paper Competition and Awards 2021, to announce the winner for the category of Esports for a Social Good. Professor Chung, please.
Thank you all for your votes. This is a very meaningful event. The winner for the APRU Student Esports Paper Competition 2021 in the category of Esports for Social Good is Esports Legacy for Social Good, written by Caden McKay from the University of British Columbia, Canada.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Caden. This trophy will be sent to you. All the best. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you very much, Professor Chung. Finally, I would like to invite Mr. Sherman Chang, Chief Financial Officer at APRU, to announce the winner for the category of Health, Wellness in Esports. Mr. Chang, please.
Hello? Okay. For last but not least, thank you all for your votes. And the winner for the APRU Student Esports Paper Competition 2021 in the category of Health, Wellness in Esports is The Psychological Impacts of Esports Gaming, a Detriment or a Lifeline in Disguise. Paper written by Rosarita Ruan de Cruz of the National University of Singapore.
Congratulations. Very nice trophy will be sent to her, I'm sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chang. Thank you very much, and thank you to all our presenters. Congratulations to everyone. Once again, I would like to thank all of our speakers today for an engaging discussion on esports as a tool to build skills of the future and new and innovative ways that the gaming industry can take leadership on diversity and inclusion, conservation, and many other strategies for social welfare. Please note that today, immediately after this session at 12 p.m., we will feature the kickoff show match event for the On the Rift Invitational and APRU Collegiate Regional Tournament of the best universities of the Asia Pacific. Tune in to APRU YouTube channel and APRU Facebook page to find out who comes out on top in Asia and North America and to register your team for the tournament. All the streaming content will be on the Delft website, delf.cyberport.hk. For more details about APRU and its esports initiatives, please visit our website at apru.org. Finally, don't forget to share your experience at today's MetaGame Conference on social media with @APRU1997 and hashtag DELF2021. Thank you all very much and have a very great weekend ahead. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 APRU Sustainable Cities and Landscapes webinar series. Today's session is about vulnerable communities and climate justice, hosted by Professor Ching-Wen Chang from the Arizona State University. This is our 8th webinar session in our series. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. My name is Yegang Ko, Program Director of the APRU Sustainable Cities and Landscapes Hub, and the Associate Professor of Landscape Architecture at the University of Oregon. Before we get started today's webinar, I just want to mention a couple of things about APRU and our Sustainable Cities and Landscapes program. So for those of you who are not familiar with APRU, first of all, APRU is the Association of Pacific Rim Universities. It's a network of 60 leading universities linking the Americas, Asia, Australasia. We leverage collective education and research capabilities of our members into the international public policy process. The Sustainable Cities and Landscapes program is one of the APRU's primary research programs. We collaborate on effective solutions to challenges of the 21st century. And SCL Hub has 19 core members across the Pacific Rim, and the hub is housed at the University of Oregon. The SCL Hub successfully held 4 annual conferences in Poland in 2017, in Hong Kong in 2018, Sydney in 2019, and 2020 virtually in Auckland. So each conference offered various activities that students and practitioners and scholars can participate in, such as research working groups, a design field school, and a student design competition, and a research symposium for PhD students. So this year, instead of our annual conference, we offer a live webinar series organized by our working groups, celebrating our 5th year. All the previous webinar recordings are available on the APRU SCL webinar series webpage. So please feel free to visit our webpage to see all the previous webinar recordings. After today, there is one more thematic webinar on the intertidal zone in December. And then we are hosting 2 more webinar series in early next year. So our next webinar will be hosted by Professor Natalie H. Berry from the University of Hong Kong at 9 a.m. on December 10th in Hong Kong time, and which will be 5 p.m. on December 9th in Pacific time. So this webinar engages with the dynamics of intertidal zones and their human and non-human inhabitants in 2 distinct regions along the Pacific Rim. So first, Hong Kong at the edge of the Pearl River Delta and the Gulf of Tribuga, an area in the Pacific coast of Colombia. Those 2 presentations will address issues related to social cultural practices of communities living in these landscapes and review ecological engineering strategies for regenerating hard coastal edges and discuss the pedagogical method that are cultivating rich design education through engagement within the intertidal zone. Lastly, exciting news is the forthcoming Rowrich Handbook of Sustainable Cities and Landscapes in the Pacific Rim. They will introduce the handbook to explore the new ways of understanding sustainable cities and landscapes. And the handbook includes over 60 case studies across the Pacific Rim, 64 chapters contributed by 116 authors from 38 institutions across the Pacific Rim, including this, the vulnerable communities and climate justice section contributed by today's speakers. I hope you continue to join us and explore how cities and regions across the Pacific Rim address climate change and social equity to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Please contact us through email, visit our website, Facebook, or Instagram if you are interested in participating in our activities. Thank you and enjoy today's webinar. Now I'd like to pass on to today's webinar host, Professor Chi-Man Chang.
Thank you very much, Professor Let me share my. Again, thank you for the introduction, and that's actually very helpful. Okay, so as Dr. Kao mentioned, today's session, we invited the authors from the upcoming handbook, and joining us, including myself, I'm Jingwen Chen. I'm the program head and associate professor of landscape architecture and in Arizona State University. And then we have John Seraph Alec from University of the Philippines, Indrajit Pal from Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand, and George Yao from National Cheng Kung University in Taiwan. And unfortunately, Dr. Adam Bobet from University of Goslow cannot join us today due to COVID and some live events happened. And he sent his regrets today. Finally, last but not least is Haejun Choi from Tajid Research Foundation in South Korea. So as Dr. Kao mentioned, we are part of the Vulnerable, Resilient, and Climate Justice Communities Working Group, and we try to address those 3 goals in the Sustainable Development Goals. how we can build a more resilient infrastructure and make innovations to build more resilient cities and communities, and how we can address climate actions and especially addressing inequity. So as today's world has becoming more complex and diverse, and we have pressing issues on multiple stressors in the world, and including the ones that like pandemic, climate change, environmental degradations, social injustice, etc. So in this complex, social, ecological, technological systems, how we can think about the interrelationship between environment, equity, and economy to be truly sustainable, in particularly when we are under the social drivers of systemic injustice and the ecological driver from climate change. So the causes of how we can look at the intersection between vulnerability, resilience, and how we can address climate justice in our communities is the core of research questions that we are trying to investigate. And as mentioned, that our works presented today is a preview of the upcoming book, and we will introduce briefly for each chapter, and then we will have a final panel discussions at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the first chapter video. I'm Jingwan Chen, Associate Professor and Program Head of Landscape Architecture, Urban Design, Environmental Design at the Design School at Arizona State University, along with my co-authors, Stephanie Prinsdale from UCLA, Louis McKenzie from AUNSW Sydney. We are presenting a book chapter, Understanding Vulnerability in Cities, Perspectives from APRU Vulnerable Communities Working Group Participants. As the title suggested, this work is derived from the APRU Sustainable Cities and Landscapes conferences, in particular in 2018 and 2019. And the participants include a range of different backgrounds from researchers, students, practitioners in academic industry. And we started in 2018 with our group, the Vulnerable Communities Group, and discussed a range of issues, what construct vulnerability and what are the gaps in the literature. And at the end of the conference, we decided to have a more engaged and in-depth interview with each other and to get some more insights even from our
Are you showing the
scholars.
slide?
So the interview yes. started, hold on.
Yeah, we cannot see the slide. We only hear the voice.
Okay, sorry. How does vulnerability look? Sorry, I'm sharing the.
Hi, I'm George Yao, a professor.
Okay, sorry about that. Sorry, I practiced earlier. I should be sharing this video.
I could see the presentation.
Oh, really? Then maybe that was.
Did you see?
Now I'm seeing it. Now I see.
Okay, did you see this?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay.
Oh,
sorry.
okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I'm nice. I'm now seeing it. Yeah. Sorry.
So the interview started in 2019 and 2020. And we started by asking ourselves, how does vulnerability look? And this is a picture from a school in Thailand. and it was constructed on a floating structure, and it's frequently flooded in the region. However, it is functional even when it's flooded. So we question ourselves, is this place looks vulnerable or if it is resilient? And to look into the next questions, we want to do a semi-structural interview with each other. And we have 11 participants and representing the government, the community, industry, academic in various regions in Australia, Hawaii, Hong Kong, India, Philippines, South Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, and the US. And we have a range of background and interests from planning, design, engineering, architecture, landscape architecture, and climate justice and climate change science. And we question ourselves, how do we conceptualize vulnerability in megacities, and how those various approaches to reducing vulnerabilities in megacities. And are those approaches generalizable, and how does climate change play a role in creating vulnerability and making different risks? And the results, we have 7 concepts that I will introduce respectively. The first one, we want to understand how we conceptualize vulnerability. And we acknowledge that the vulnerability in megacities is a nested, tiered, and interacting system. Starting by understanding the root causes of vulnerability, we understand there are history and various contexts in different communities that can cause and construct the socially constructed risks and vulnerability. For example, in Phoenix, there are environmental justice issues where Hispanic origin and low-income families are living right next to hazardous waste sites and industrial land uses. And in Philippines, there are millions of informal settlers living in the dangerous flooding zones and facing the typhoons and other hazards. And in Sydney, Australia, the health impacts are also proportionally affecting vulnerable communities, especially in some parts of Western Sydney that are more exploit patterns of urban development, a lack of public infrastructure and transportation to help to mitigate those impacts. And those are also a lot of more migrant communities living there. So the point we were making is, it's not how you live in cities under those different conditions. It's not how the literature defining, but it's how the city was constructed. And there are also personal experience and perspective perceptions can affect how vulnerability is constructed. And some people experience vulnerability maybe in their whole life. For example, in Bangladesh, they may not realize they are under the risk, and they may not know the best way to empower, to act, and to counter the vulnerability. So the impact of limited choice as how they construct vulnerability can be largely overlooked. And next, we found an interesting point from the younger participants, and they particularly talk about generational vulnerabilities, especially in Hong Kong, for example. The young people cannot afford to buy affordable housings, and they cannot be independent as their parents do. And sometimes they were not fully understood by parents and older generations as they were being thought and perceived as not working hard enough. So there are generational gaps in understanding the vulnerability. And then there is, when we talk about vulnerability and climate change together, we have to think about the social justice and inequity perspective. As one participant noted, sometimes I found that the whole idea of climate vulnerability in megacities and artifacts a way to deflect attention from the very basic kinds of social justice, environmental questions that have existed. We found sometimes we talk about climate science as if those social injustice can suddenly disappear, but in fact, we have to face how we can uproot those injustices and how can we address those climate impacts if people don't even have the sufficient basic needs. Therefore, in some cases, we may hear that in Hawaii, for example, the indigenous communities were left out in the conversations for climate change action plans and climate adaptation efforts. So there is a lot of social systemic issues that we need to address while we are talking about climate change and the vulnerability. And the next question would be, how can we reconcile the differences between local and global issues? Because the vulnerability is very diverse, and there's disparities within cities, even within the same communities, and it's operating at a micro scale, individual level, or at the neighborhood and community level. So there is a variety of scale that we are talking about. It's definitely not one size fits all, and we need to be locally specific. So how can we think about a global urban public? And this is also about constituency, because all the politics are local. So how can we consider a global impacts and while we can address from local and community scale? And reducing the vulnerability in megacity will require organizing the units at sufficient scales. And so how can we operate within a large framework to study local scale? So there is a gap in the literature and how we can address those social issues. And there is also a gap in the practice and theory and how we can make sure those frameworks can be implemented. The next about place specificity and the transferability. So that we have to think about solutions